When I turned 25, I took my very first solo trip outside of North America. I chose Vietnam. It was cheap. The photos online looked incredible, and 2 coworkers had gone the year before and couldn't stop raving about it. I spent most of the trip splitting time between Ho Chi Minh City and a string of smaller coastal towns. The first week was flawless. Everyone I met was warm, the street food was some of the best I'd ever had, and I never once felt on edge. What happened during the second half of the trip. I'd booked 4 nights at a small guest house just outside Mui Na. Nothing fancy, maybe 15 rooms scattered across a couple of low buildings, jungle pressing in on 3 sides and the sea on the 4th. It was quiet. That's exactly why I picked it. On my second day, I rented a motorbike and spent the afternoon riding the coastal road. Around sunset, I stopped at a small open-air place for dinner, had a couple of beers, and started heading back after dark. About halfway to the guest house, I noticed a bike behind me. I didn't think anything of it. It was a single road hugging the coastline, so of course someone else might be going the same way. Except every time I slowed, he slowed. Every time I sped up, so did he. I pulled over and pretended to check my phone. He rode past me. For a second, I felt stupid for worrying. Then, about 50 meters ahead, he pulled off the road and just stopped. Sat there, waiting. I turned around and rode the other way until I found a lit gas station with people standing around outside, and I stayed there for almost 20 minutes telling myself I was being paranoid. Eventually, I convinced myself of exactly that, and rode back toward the guest house. Nothing happened that night. The next morning, at the beach, I noticed a man sitting alone near the tree line, not looking at the water, not on his phone, just watching people. I only really clocked him because something about him felt familiar. It took a minute to place it. Same dark jacket as the rider from the night before. I couldn't swear it was him. I never got a clear look at that rider's face, but my stomach knew before my brain did. And as I walked back to my room that afternoon, I glanced over my shoulder, and he was walking too. Not close enough to look suspicious, just close enough to still be there. What I found outside my window at 2 a.m. that night is something I still can't fully explain, and it's coming up in part 2. That evening, I mentioned the whole thing to the guy working the front desk. He listened politely enough, but didn't seem particularly worried. Told me solo travelers sometimes get jumpy, and to call if anything actually happened. Saying it out loud, honestly, I felt a little embarrassed. A guy at the beach. A guy on a bike. That was the whole story. I went to bed feeling ridiculous. Around 2 a.m., I woke up needing the bathroom. Moonlight was leaking through the curtains. As I sat up, I heard something outside. First I assumed an animal, then I heard it again, clearer this time. Footsteps. My room was ground floor. The footsteps stopped directly under my window. I froze. A few seconds later, someone tried the door handle. Slow, deliberate, one careful turn. My heart was suddenly slamming in my chest. The handle eased back to its resting position. Silence. Then one more attempt, a little harder this time. I grabbed my phone and called the front desk. No answer. I remembered too late that the office had no overnight staff. I was completely alone. The footsteps moved off from the door. I tried telling myself it was a confused guest who'd wandered to the wrong room. I don't know why I did what I did next, but I stood up, crossed the room, and pulled back a corner of the curtain. There was a man crouched directly beneath my window, looking up. The instant he saw the curtain move, he was on his feet and gone. I locked myself in the bathroom and stayed there until sunrise. When the owner arrived around 7 a.m., I told him everything. He asked me to describe the man, and when I finished, he pulled out his phone and showed me a photo without a word. It was him. The owner told me the man wasn't a guest. Local businesses had reported him multiple times over the past year. He followed tourists, sometimes for days, and no one knew what he actually wanted because he always vanished before police showed up. I checked out that morning. The owner arranged a ride to another hotel closer to town. I thought that was the end of it. 2 hours later, at a convenience store during the drive, I glanced out the window and saw a motorbike parked across the road under a tree. Same dark jacket. Watching the store. The second he saw me look, he started the engine and rode off. I never saw him again. To this day, I don't know if he wanted to rob me, take me, or just watch, but somehow, every time, he knew exactly where I was. That wasn't the only time a stranger found their way into a stranger's territory undetected. The next story starts with a night out that seemed harmless, and ends with someone standing over a sleeping room full of teenagers. When I was 17, my class took a 5-day school trip to Amsterdam. I had a bunch of close friends along, so it was set up to just be a good time. Museums, canals, the usual. Since it was school run, most of the itinerary was mandatory, and honestly a lot of it was genuinely fun. But I've always been the type who likes sneaking outside the schedule, doing a couple of things we weren't supposed to, just for the thrill of it. By the end of day 4, everyone crashed early. Our bus home left at dawn, and it was a long drive back to Denmark. I'm a night person, so the idea of sleeping through our last night in the city instead of actually seeing it felt like a waste. I asked around, but my friends were all turning in. So I sat outside the room I shared with 3 other guys, opened up a dating app, and started messaging a few matches. Eventually I locked in plans to meet someone a few kilometers away. I slipped out with the room key, an old building shared by our group and a handful of other guests, adrenaline buzzing, feeling like this was some kind of secret mission. I followed my GPS toward her place, got heckled by a few older guys outside a bar, and kept walking. The route took me through a red light district, big glass storefronts glowing under neon. Workers posed behind the glass, tapping the windows. I was 17 and alone, and it rattled me a little, even while some part of me was fascinated by something I'd genuinely never seen before. I got to her building. We hung out, had a good time. Nothing strange about that part at all. Afterward, I started navigating back on foot. It was September, cold, and it had started raining. My GPS routed me differently than the way I'd come, and I was in a thin jacket with no umbrella. The streets around me had emptied out. No bars, no landmarks, just clusters of men standing near narrow alleyways. Then my phone screen went black. Dead. I lost it a little, swearing, smacking the phone, trying to force it back on. Nothing. I looked around for anything familiar. There wasn't a single thing I recognized. Getting back to that hotel wasn't even the scary part. What was waiting for me in my bunk a few hours later is what I still think about. That's in part 4. Realizing I'd put myself in this mess, I walked up to the first stranger I saw and asked for directions back toward the city center. Figured I could find my way from there. He could tell I was young and clearly panicking, and thankfully he was willing to help. I told him a rough version of my situation, and instead of just pointing me toward downtown, he ended up walking me the entire way back to the hotel, through the pouring rain. I didn't fully trust him, kept a hand on my pocket with my keys, and phoned the whole walk, but he never gave me a reason to worry. I thanked him at the door, relieved the worst part of the night was finally over. The building had an automatic locking system on both the main entrance and the individual rooms. I figured that made it airtight, No way in unless you already had a key. I showered, changed, and passed out in the bottom bunk with barely 3 hours left before we had to be up. I woke up to a flashlight in my face. A stranger's face was inches from mine. I froze, didn't make a sound, hard hammering, sitting bolt upright in the bunk. I asked in English who he was. My 3 roommates were still asleep, and he wasn't acting aggressive, so somewhere under the panic I registered that this might not be immediately dangerous. He said he'd come up from the lobby to help my friend Marcus, who'd apparently lost something. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand to check the time, 4 a.m., and my watch was still right there beside it. I did have a friend named Marcus, known for doing impulsive things, so it wasn't completely out of the question. The man stepped back from my bed and started going through our closet. I asked what exactly Marcus had lost, and why that meant searching our closet at 4 in the morning in a room Marcus hadn't even been in. I turned my phone flashlight on him. "His passport," he said. "He can't find his passport." Another student wandered in, already talking to the man about it, like this was an established search party. My roommate woke up asking the same questions I had. I answered, half convinced something was off, but too exhausted to push it, and eventually I drifted back to sleep watching the man dig through the backpack of the guy across from me. By morning, we found out the truth. 3 of us were missing belongings: a passport, a laptop, other personal items. The helper, who claimed to come from the lobby, had never worked there at all. Nobody knows exactly how he got into the building, but the theory is he'd already lifted Marcus's passport, read the name off it, and used that to build a cover story convincing enough to wake up an entire room of exhausted teenagers and walk them through their own belongings while he searched. The reason he'd been hovering right over my face? My phone and watch, sitting in plain view. He'd been about to take them next. Police came quickly. Our bus home got delayed so the guys who'd been robbed could give statements. We never really got a follow-up on what happened to him. To this day I wonder if I was somehow the reason it happened at all. Maybe I didn't pull the main door shut all the way when I rushed back in, soaked and distracted, and let him walk in right behind me. The last story is the one that still gets brought up at reunions, because it isn't just one man following one person. It's 3 cars, a foreign police station standing completely empty at night, and a driver who wouldn't stop staring. Part 5. In late summer, a few friends and I drove up into the far north of Sweden, deep into the Arctic Circle, to a region known for dramatic coastline and hiking trails. We flew into the nearest city to rent a car. Up there, towns are small and spread thin, with long stretches of empty road between them. We were staying in a rental apartment in a small fishing village roughly 7 hours by car from the airport. After a full day of travel, we just wanted to get there. The speed limits were strict, and I'll admit, as the only driver in the group, sticking to them on those long empty stretches was harder than it should have been. It was closing in on midnight, and we'd gotten through most of the drive. About 40 minutes left after passing the last real town before the village. The road, mostly single lane up to that point, opened into a passing lane just as we left town, and I used it to overtake a dark sedan ahead of us. I thought nothing of it. I was mid-conversation with my friends when I noticed him closing in fast on our bumper. He'd creep up, drop back, creep up again, and then he switched on a huge floodlight mounted to his roof, apparently common up there for the long dark winters. It filled the car with blinding light and made it impossible to focus on the road. Given how seriously drivers up there tend to take speed limits, I figured maybe he thought I'd overtaken recklessly. I stayed calm, kept to the limit, hoping he'd back off on his own. I muttered to my friend in the passenger seat, half joking, "Let's see if he actually keeps following us." He did. My patience ran out fast. I put some distance between us, and strangely, he didn't chase to close the gap back down. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't, because a few minutes later, at a red light on a one-lane bridge into the village, I watched in the mirror as he rounded the corner the second the light turned green. I decided against driving straight to our apartment. No reason to hand him our address. Instead, I wound through random side streets in the village to see if he'd follow. He did. Everyone in the car was panicking now. It was past 1 a.m., and we were about as remote gets. What was waiting for us at the dead end, and the 2 extra cars that showed up right when we thought we'd lost him, is where this gets genuinely dangerous. Part 6. We hit a dead end. I had to turn the car around to face him head-on. He tried to box us in, but his car was small enough that with some aggressive wheel work, I muscled past him. As I did, I got a clear look at his face for the first time. Completely blank. No anger, no excitement. Just watching us, expressionless, as we shot past. There were 3 of us guys in the car, and for a second I actually considered getting out to confront him. Then I remembered where we were. A region where firearms are common for hunting, legally carried by plenty of people. For all I knew, he had one within reach. This was a man who'd already tailed us for the better part of an hour in the middle of the night. I wasn't willing to find out what else he might do. One of my friends called the local police, which was its own challenge. We didn't know the area or speak the language. We got lucky and reached a station with an English-speaking operator who told us an officer would take a statement, but the station was back in the town we'd already passed through, another 40 minutes away. I drove fast. He stayed glued to us the entire way. As we started seeing signs and houses on the edge of town, he finally slowed down. I felt a flicker of relief until I checked the mirror again and saw 2 more cars pulling out from the shoulder to join him. One slotted in ahead of him, one behind. Now it was a convoy of 3, moving together like they'd done this before. Google Maps took us into an industrial harbor district, warehouses, tight alleys, not a soul around. The station sat right at the end of it. As we pulled into the lot, the convoy split off in 3 different directions. They knew exactly where we were going. The station itself was dark. Empty. We called the operator again. She said an officer was already on the way. Meanwhile, we could see the 3 cars still circling somewhere out past the warehouses, like they were waiting. After a few tense minutes, a large officer came around the back of the building on foot. He was fairly unbothered at first, until he saw the girls in our group visibly shaking and crying. Then he offered to escort us out of town in a van. He went to get the vehicle. We pulled out slowly behind him, crawling past every dark loading bay and side alley, and I could see him coming up behind us in the mirror, right as 2 of the cars pulled out from the sides, and the original sedan drove straight past us, the driver locking eyes with me the entire time, expression still completely flat. I leaned on the horn and hit the brakes, hoping the officer would clock that this was our guy. A few seconds passed. Then his van's lights flared on, and he swung out to block the sedan from going any further. My friend was out of our car and running toward the van before I could stop him. I followed a minute later, figuring that if things went bad, at least we'd have numbers and a police officer on our side. When I reached the back of the van, I saw the driver up close, an average-looking man, thick Eastern European accent, muttering something to the officer while still staring past him, straight at me. He climbed back into his own car like nothing had happened. The officer told us, apologetically, that technically the man hadn't broken any laws. Driving on a public road at night wasn't a crime, and there was nothing to charge him with. But he'd taken the man's details and gave us a direct line to call if he came near us again. The officer escorted us to the edge of town and no further. He couldn't take us all the way to our village. I felt relief and dread in equal measure as he peeled off and we were on our own again. I kept checking the mirror. Nothing. Still, we parked well away from our actual apartment and locked ourselves inside, trying to shake off the entire night. The 2 extra cars are the part that still bothers me. Who were they? Why did he call them in? Whatever they had planned, we never found out, and honestly, I'm just glad we made it to a police station before we did. The rest of the trip went fine. It's a genuinely beautiful part of the world. But it's hard not to think about how differently that night could have gone.